Wookie's going to give me a call.
All right, here we go.
Some advice.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 357th Annual Daily Wire Backstage Awards Night, rambling conversation about lots of stuff over whiskey and cigars. Coming to you live from the second floor of a vaguely Art Deco building near a used car lot somewhere in the valley. And now, our hosts, extremely small G, Baby K, God King of the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring. Hate-filled conservative lunatic, husband and father, Ben Shapiro. An old crank who yells at the clouds, Andrew Klavan. And finally, something or other, Michael Knowles. For Daily Wire Backstage, fake laugh in 3, 2, 1.
She ain't the boss of me. Hey guys, I'm Jeremy Boring, the small G Baby K God King, and whoever wrote that voiced monologue is now officially fired.
Go home.
Thank you for joining us here at the Daily Wire Backstage, the Wokest award show in Hollywood history, the only award show that you know recognizes good movies, more or less, if that's still a thing. Roll intro graphic. Yeah, all right. I feel like we get worse.
Yeah. And the night is young, too.
Yeah, you know, sometimes you watch the pilot of a show after like you're 12 seasons in, you go back and watch the pilot, like, this thing was good. This thing was so
This was
funny.
never
All
good.
downhill.
This was never good.
It's
It
like
was
the
never
fifth
good.
season of Law and Order when it starts to really trend down.
I do want to take a minute and introduce the lady of the evening, not Michael Knowles in his Oscar gown, but one
call her a lady
lovely
of
and
the
talented
evening.
Elisha Krause.
You literally just called her a lady.
I called her a lady.
of the
Favorite
evening.
woman of
What was
the
that?
Not a lady of the evening, the lady.
I'm sorry, take two. I would like to acknowledge our one and only street walking.
You know, my dad
co-host,
is watching.
Elisha Krause.
My dad is watching, and you know, he's from boomer country, so guns are still legal there. Boring. Watch out.
Yeah, but Alicia, he has to take a boat from where he is to here. So.
And California would stop him at the border and confiscate all those guns from him. Anyway, welcome everyone. Do you know what's happening? Because I sure don't, but I do know that all of our subscribers this evening will be able to submit their questions over at dailywireback.com. I'm going to repeat that because Ben Shapiro is losing along, so don't forget to go over to dailywire.com, click on the Daily Wire Backstage banner at the top of the page to watch the live stream, and then write your question in the chat box, and we'll do our best to make the guys answer it. Their answers will be more interesting depending on how much whiskey they have. Also, we're going to be playing a really fun game of bingo tonight. Head on over to the Daily Wire Twitter account, @RealDailyWire on Twitter, where we pinned the bingo boards for you to follow along and play with other Daily Wire fans. It's going to be lots of fun. There's some great options like Ben interrupts anyone, Drew coughing. I think that's already happened. There's also a free space, but only after a 70% bingo tax. I kind of wanted a hashtag backstage so white option, but that didn't make it fair. Anyway, it'll be lots of fun. We'll be checking in throughout the night, and I don't know, maybe next time you tune into Backstage, we'll come up with a drinking game. But tonight, play hashtag backstage bingo with us, and finally, be sure to vote in the Facebook poll. Tonight's poll question is going to be, who should have won Best Picture?
For a lady of the evening, not only does she have a heart of gold, like all ladies of the evening in Hollywood, she's pretty funny.
It's pretty great we could book Julia Roberts to do our backstage. That's fabulous.
So, guys, we didn't all get dressed up for nothing. The Academy Awards were last night. Oh, we actually got dressed up for nothing.
Pretty much.
The Academy Awards were last night, and we're going to talk all about who won. I'm hoping one of you guys knows. Who should have won, and then probably just talk some politics. But first, someone recently said in the Twitter comments on one of our shows that they only tune in to hear me clumsily segue into ad reads.
That's the only reason I come here.
So something policy genius.
That's exactly right. So I'm here tonight against my will. I'd like to die. And if I do die, the good news is I know that I'm covered and I have life insurance. But if you were to die tonight, do you feel the same? This is why you need to go visit our friends over at Policy Genius. Because getting life insurance can feel like assembling the world's worst jigsaw puzzle. It's confusing. It takes forever. And when you're finally done, it doesn't even look cool. But if you have a mortgage, kids, or anyone who depends on your income, it's a puzzle you need to solve. Policy Genius can make it happen for you. Policy Genius is the easy way to get life insurance. In just 2 minutes, you can compare quotes from the top insurers and find the best policy for you, which is what everyone in this room should do before they die of lung cancer. When you apply online, the advisors of Policy Genius will handle all the red tape. They'll negotiate your rate with the insurance company. No commission sales agents, no hidden fees. Policy Genius doesn't just do life insurance. They also do home owner's insurance and auto insurance and disability insurance. They're your one-stop shop for financial protection. So if you find life insurance puzzling, head on over to policygenius.com. In 2 minutes, you can compare quotes, find the right policy, and save up to 40% doing it. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy life insurance. Go check them out right now at policygenius.com and make sure you're covered so you too are comfortable in your own death.
You know, I remember right when I started working here, one of the first things Ben said to me, said, "Hey, Knowles, get life insurance. Get life insurance right now."
The best thing about it is, you know, your dependents will say, he wasn't so bad.
My favorite thing about Policy Genius, though, is that they keep us on the air.
Yeah, that's good.
They're great sponsors of the show, and the other people who keep us on the air are actually the fans. So if you're not a subscriber, we'd like for you to become one over at dailywire.com.
Okay, let me explain this. Here's the deal. I have been here for hours today. Hours.
Yes.
I did my podcast this morning.
At what time?
At 6:30 this morning.
Oh,
then I went and I did Dr. Phil's show, which is going to be on Wednesday, so you should tune into that. Then I did 2 more hours of my show live, and now I'm here for 2 more hours with these jackasses. So if I have to be here, the least you can do, you ungrateful... all you can, $9.99 a month. That's all we ask from you. And if you spend $99 a year, which is cheaper than $9.99 a month, do the math. You can. I know AOC has trouble with this, but if you can do the math, $99 a year, cheaper than $9.99 a month, you'll find this is true. Then you get this, the very greatest in all beverage vessels, the Leftist Tears hot or cold tumbler. So go check it out, and please subscribe right now to keep us on the air and provide us some incentive for the love of God to continue doing shows like this, because I will tell you, I am this close to not.
I have a pretty good time. I don't know about this guy.
He hasn't had enough rum reading.
It was good to see you. Yeah.
So last night, not the worst Oscars of all time. I actually have to say, and I think that at least tens of thousands of Americans will agree, certainly not millions, because the ratings were actually up slightly last night.
Really?
Yeah, they were up slightly
Well, that's
last
because
night.
3 people watched last year, 4 watched this year.
No, an Oscar, an Academy Awards with no host is more popular than an Academy Awards with Jimmy Kimmel hosting.
That is guaranteed.
No, scientifically proven.
Last night was the best host the Oscars have had since Steve Martin. No, seriously, in 10 years, that was the best host they've had. No host.
And
Well,
the
the
show
truth
wasn't
is-
bad as a result. It didn't suffer.
I disagree with this. The best host they've had was Ricky Gervais.
Uh-huh.
Didn't he?
was good. He
You
was
know why?
good,
Because
yeah.
what I actually want, if I were going to waste my life watching the Oscars, what I would have wanted was a host who was just going to crap all over everyone in the room. Because the truth is, they crap all over us.
That's
so
right.
I mean, that's
All
what
night
that show
long, yeah.
was. The entire show, as always, was a 3-hour-long ode to themselves, with Lady Gaga walking and wearing a $30 million diamond. I kid you not, and not one article in the woke blogosphere about income inequality after she wears a $30 million diamond to the Oscars. You know, Jeff Bezos can create a $1 billion company that employs hundreds of thousands of people, and he's a bad guy. Lady Gaga sings some songs and wears a $30 million diamond, but income inequality is of no consequence whatsoever. And so, you know, honestly, what they should do, if they were smart, is they would have somebody come in and roast the room. They used to do this. Bob Hope used to do this. Bob Hope used to actually do this every year.
Bob Hope was actually
Even-
funny. He was actually funny when he did it.
And that would have been good. But I was right before the show, I was telling the guys that I do have a foolproof method of picking the best picture. And I knew who was going to win best picture this year. I knew who was going to win last year and the year before. I've been right 3 years in a
Come
row.
on.
Let's hear it. Let's hear
Okay.
it. Yeah.
It's called the Wokathon. So here's how it works. All you have to do is pick the most intersectional candidate among the candidates for Best Picture this year. So this year, the various nominees were Black Panther, about black folks, Black Klansman, about black folks, The Favorite, about lesbians, Bohemian Rhapsody, about a gay guy. And then and those were the 4 intersectional candidates. And then you had A Star is Born, which was non-intersectional.
Right.
And you had Roma, about a Latina. And then you had Green Book, which is about a gay black guy. Done. That's the entire thing. Done. It wasn't gay, it wasn't black, it was gay and black. Go back to the year before.
But you left out Republican Bad, which was the other film that was nominated.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry,
That's
I forgot
true.
about Republican Bad, but Republican Bad is still about white people.
Oh,
So that's
true.
not a thing.
It's not
Okay,
intersectional.
not a thing. And then if you go back to last year, you'll recall that the movies that were nominated, if you can recall any of them, were it was a bunch of random sort of. There were some that were intersectional. There were some movies about black folks and some movies about gay folks. The one with Army Hammer was nominated last year, which is about gay folks.
Call Me by Your Name.
Right, and then there was I'm trying to remember which other. There was a movie about black folks last year as well.
Get Out.
I think Hidden Faces. Hidden Figures. Hidden Figures.
Figures.
That was nominated last year, but the one that won was about a gay black guy, right? It was Moonlight that won. Oh, sorry, it was The Shape of Water that won. That had a black person and a gay person and a commie,
And
which
a
is like
fish.
and a fish and a person stooping a fish, which is like boom, done. Oscars forever. Oscars for, like if you had like an NCAA bracket of Oscar winners, that one comes in like seeded 1. And then the year before was Moonlight, right, which was gay black story. So. Next year, all you have to do if you want to win an Oscar is just check the most intersectional boxes. It's like the 2020 Democratic primaries. This is all you have to do if you actually wish to win an Oscar. Because the truth is, the best movies of last year, not a single one was nominated, not one.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. What should have been nominated?
Okay, I think we'll all agree. I recommend it to all of you, so you have to agree by law. But the best movie of last year, and in my opinion of the last 5 years, was The Death of Stalin.
It was an excellent movie.
Fabulous
That
movie.
Which is
really good movie.
phenomenal.
Yep.
And it got no attention. The critics liked it. It got 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is hysterically funny. It is dark. It is really witty.
And it's almost exactly true.
It's
Every
exactly.
moment of it is almost exactly
But
right.
left-winger bad is not an Oscar contender.
That's right. So it didn't even get a single nomination, not one. And everything in that movie is better than anything in any of the movies that were nominated this year.
Yeah.
That was my pick. And I know that, Jeremy, you had another movie that came to mind.
I thought A Quiet Place.
I agree with this.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
They'll never
Absolutely.
nominate a horror film in this day and age.
They did. They nominated Get Out last year.
That's
No, that's fair. I stand
But
corrected.
Get Out was way woker than A Quiet
Correct.
Place.
It's a woke movie. And A Quiet Place is not a woke movie.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it was a real movie. I
It
mean,
was an inventive movie.
And I
It was inventive. It was deeply dramatic and terrifying.
Yep.
But it was also creative in a way that
It was a
no
high
film-
concept film. Yeah,
it
that's
also said something to me. I'm sure this wasn't intentional, but it said something to me about outrage culture. Open your mouth and they'll come and kill you.
That's right.
Okay, the other movie, I don't know if you guys saw this one. It won Best Animated Flick, but it should have been nominated for Best Picture. Was Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, that was good.
Okay,
didn't see it.
Black Panther was nominated for Best Picture. Okay, it was fine. Like I watched it. It was
so much worse
it was
than fine.
I thought it was okay. I mean, I've seen virtually all the Marvel movies. It was like a B Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Fine. It was like the 4th best superhero movie of the last year. Forget the last 5 years. The last year, I can name 3 that are better off the top of my head.
Name them.
Okay, I will. Into the Spider-Verse was a better movie. Infinity War came out this year. That was a better movie.
It was a better movie.
And here's the controversial part. I'll go with Aquaman over Black Panther.
Guys,
so
I'm
bad.
literally shaking from the racism right now. I am literally shaking.
Oh, wait,
But I thought that,
criticize.
but according
Now
to
we know
Shape
what
of
human
Water,
fish
fish
is actually,
right?
yeah.
Fish are good. Fish are good. So, but
the amazing thing to me,
Into the Spider-Verse is better than all of these.
well,
And
certainly,
Into the
but
Spider-Verse is
it's
terrific.
interesting because I watched Black Panther this week. I hadn't seen it when it first came out because I wasn't sure if I was allowed. Because it was right. You got the Halloween mask. You remember?
Yeah,
There's all
that's
the
right.
controversy, and it was apparently just you're not supposed to
You're
if
not
you're white.
allowed.
But
It's not for you. Yeah.
So I watched it this week. Is it not a racist movie?
It's a racist
And by the way, I don't mean racist
Profoundly
like in
racist.
the way that the left is racist,
No.
because they actually want people to be segregated into different race groups.
Yeah.
I mean racist like old school white racism. Like, isn't it an old school white racist movie?
Well, it's based
like,
on a comic that was written in the 60s. I mean, it's,
Yeah, and
You
there-
mean they're
there's
using
this-
tropes in Africa that
these-
seem like
these
they're
really
straight from
African tropes
And-
that are yes.
And not only that, the whole idea of the movie was we could have had European culture if only a magic rock had fallen on us, which is like, first of all, it's degrading to the black people in American culture who have contributed enormous amounts. It's like they should be ashamed of their culture, which is just not true. And we all came here to try and save our lives.
It also happens to be not true. There is a magic rock in Nigeria. They have amazing mineral wealth in Nigeria, right? Cobalt is a blue magic rock that exists in Nigeria, and it is not a well-governed place, and so it's a bad place.
And it's a very small-minded idea of what culture is.
Also, they wanted to build Trump's wall, right? I mean, like the whole place exists inside Trump's wall. Like if you have no dealings with the outside world, if you don't deal with any of the outside world, the idea that colonialism would have corrupted this place just like it corrupted all the others, except that they guarded this place, that's not accurate either, because there are places in Africa that were not really touched very much by colonialism, and they're some of the worst places in Africa too. I mean, like
the other thing that struck me about every single movie is every movie was basically about people my age. You know, they took place in the 60s, the 70s. They were based on movies that were made first in the 1930s. A Star Is Born. The Black.
I couldn't even bring.
Panthers
Did you see A Star Is Born?
I saw it.
Okay,
yeah.
so I want to get your opinion on it because I saw the one with Judy Garland and James Mason, which is an amazing film.
Great movie.
And Judy Garland is unbelievable. It's the best performance she gets in her.
With Frederick March is a great movie.
Right.
Yeah.
The first two are really good. How is this one?
It's mediocre. I mean, Bradley Cooper has now replaced Denzel Washington as the best actor who's also a leading man. And Denzel's kind of aged out of that role, and he's so good that he makes Lady Gaga look bad, and she's not bad. She's just a singer doing it. She's a singer doing an acting turn, so she looks really bad. And they have a lot of ad-lib scenes in which she's just obviously going off the reservation, doesn't know what she's doing. The music is nice. There's nice music in it, but basically it's mediocre.
Okay, and then Roma was nominated, right?
I watched Roma this morning.
I'm still watching it.
I know, yeah, it's still on. I woke up very early to watch this stupid movie because Drew's a sadist, and I had to do it on his show. And I watched that whole thing. You got through the first part.
First 20 minutes.
The first 5 minutes is a puddle. It's a shot of a puddle.
Correct.
The thing with Roma actually typifies everything that is wrong with Hollywood. It is. They say that nostalgia is history after a few drinks. It is this nostalgic, self-indulgent, pretentious tripe. It is a movie about nothing. It is pointless. In so much as it has a point, it's a sort of bland bourgeois movie. It is just. It's the sort of movie that people who have never seen a good movie think a good movie is supposed to look like. You know, because it's in black and white and it's really slow.
He's right that there is legitimately a 3-minute establishing shot of water washing over cobblestones in the beginning, followed by another 3-minute establishing shot of a small plaza no bigger than the size of our combined offices. Really, and it's not like an establishing shot like at the beginning of Pinocchio, where it swoops through the entire city. And you're like, wow, this is really cool. Yeah. It's an established shot of a door, and they turn the camera, and it's another door, guys. And then they turn back. It's still the first door hasn't moved. It's actually still there. It's unbelievable. And this is great direction. That one, by the way, the best Oscar winner last night was Bohemian Rhapsody for Best Film Editing. That is absolutely hysterically funny. Have you seen any of the clips? Just not even the movie. Okay, so it is the worst edited film in the history of film. So literally,
noticed that.
So go back. There are a bunch of people who have posted, like film editors, who've gone on and posted little clips on Twitter of the movie. There's one scene where the band is sitting around a table and they're being talked to by the manager or something, and it's just random cuts of reaction shots that don't even make sense. It's like they filmed all of the people with various cameras, and they had a monkey with a toggle switch in back, just trying to do. Like it was.
Not to mention that I know a little something about movie making. Haven't been around Hollywood a day or two. I am almost certain that the entire first act of Bohemian Rhapsody was altered in the edit bay, which actually causes the characters to be slightly more sympathetic, which I think is what they were going for, but makes the movie not make any sense. There are scenes that I'm certain are happening out of the sequence of the screenplay, which, listen, that happens in Hollywood, but when it's done well in editing, you don't know about it.
Right.
Whereas in Bohemian Rhapsody, it was pretty evident.
This was one of my favorite things of the night, was Bryan Singer completely disappearing.
They
disappeared Bryan Singer. So they were winning technical awards, and everybody would get up there and be like, and I'd like to thank everybody down to the grip. And the director is just like in the back going, what about me? Like, you were molesting the people.
It was literally the Oscars were the end of Death of Stalin. Like, Bryan Singer just
That's exactly right.
You want to hear something sad? I happen to be reading a book that is about the friendship between Henry Fonda and James Stewart. In 1940, James Stewart won the Oscar for Philadelphia Story to make up for the fact that they hadn't given it to him for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington the year before. And when he won, he felt he had stolen it from Henry Fonda for Grapes of Wrath. Those movies are still, you watch those today, and they are as modern as they were at the time. It's like 80 years ago now.
The movies then, I mean, it's not an
exaggeration. The number of people who will watch these movies in 80 years is exactly zero. Zero number of people will watch these movies.
You can't name the ones that have won in the last 3. Yeah. When's the last time you picked up a movie, the last movie that I saw, where I've actually picked it up since it was nominated for anything, was Whiplash. That was, I think, 4 years ago.
You like that, yeah.
Okay, but the number of movies that you will actually...
The Pianist, I think, was the last winner that I actually watched.
Every year at Christmas time, I take in a showing of Crash.
This was my favorite part. There were a bunch of articles about how this was the worst best picture winner since Crash. And I thought, did anyone see Shape of Water last year? It was the worst movie I have ever seen. I mean, forget about the worst winner.
Except it had Nick Searcy in it. That
the international film.
Well, that's different, right? I mean,
Peabody Award.
But Nick Searcy was also in every single movie last year. Every movie. He was in 3 Oscar-nominated films.
I want to tell you guys a funny story about international film and television star and Peabody Award-winning actor Nick Searcy. He followed me on Twitter today.
Wow, this is big. He knew you were doing this show. He wanted to get in good.
So we got get to another one of our sponsors. I can't even pretend to do it. I'm now in my head about these ad reads.
They got you.
They got to me. Yeah, you should never read Twitter. Never read the comments, you guys. Bravo, company manufacturing, Ben.
So when the founders crafted the Constitution, the first thing they did was make sacred the rights of the individual to share their ideas without limitation by the government. The second right they enumerated was the right of the people to protect that speech and their own persons with force. I believe in that. Everybody in this room believes in that, except for somebody back there. But in any case, Bravo Company Manufacturing was started in a garage by a Marine veteran more than 2 decades ago to build a professional-grade product that meets combat standards. BCM believes that the same level of protection should be provided to every American, regardless of whether they're a private citizen or a professional. They are not a sporting arms company. As I have said many times, a gun is not for going hunting. A gun is for protecting your life. It is protecting your civilization, protecting your family. That's what it's about. If you can go hunting with it too, fantastic. But BCM is manufactured, so if you're in a life-threatening situation, the gun is going to work. Each component of a BCM rifle is hand-assembled and tested by Americans to a life-saving standards. And BCM works with leading instructors of marksmanship from top levels of America's special ops forces who can teach the skills necessary to defend yourself, your family, or others. To learn more about Bravo Company Manufacturing, head on over to BravoCompanyMFG.com, and you can discover more about their products, special offers, and upcoming news. That is BravoCompanyMFG.com. If you need more convincing, go check them out at YouTube. They have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Bravo Company USA. Meet the people behind the company. It really is fantastic. I know the people who run Bravo Company USA, great folks. Check them out at BravoCompanyMFG.com or youtube.com/Bravo Company USA. They're doing important work, and you should join them.
Yeah. So I think I took you to buy your first gun.
You did.
Yeah.
You did. I still have it somewhere.
So would you
I keep it in a safe. I
took you to buy your first gun.
You did. Yeah, you've got a real track record.
Yeah, it really is a thing that I've done because I'm from Texas, as you know. Once I moved to LA, I realized that no one owns a firearm. And I thought, well, I'm going to make it, like some people help the poor. And some people help the widows. Well, I'm just going to help people ammo up. Back then, I didn't even know I was a conservative. That's a true story. It was during the Bush-Gore election. It was the first presidential election I ever voted in. And, like George W. Bush had been my governor for 8 years, and Al Gore had been my vice president for 8 years.
Yeah.
I kind of didn't want to see either one of them go. I thought, one of these guys is going to lose, go off his rocker, grow a great big burly beard, and say that the sky is falling, and become a billionaire. And I just didn't want it to happen to old George, so in the end I voted.
Thank you.
I didn't need a gun, though, because I lived next to one of the biggest stars in Hollywood and one of the biggest anti-gun activists. And there were so many guards with guns in her house that they would call me up. They would call me up and say to me, "We're watching your house, too. Don't worry."
That's not true.
I don't need
That's true?
That's absolutely.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
absolutely true.
So her armed security, she had so much armed security that they were
watching my house.
They were watching your
yeah,
house.
so I didn't need a gun.
Well, the most heavily armed person left in our office since the last person went on to have babies, which is a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Is one Elisha Krause, who, Elisha, what do you got for us over there?
Well, I'm not like Miss Congeniality over here. Got holsters everywhere and no one can tell. So the celebrities last night went home with, these swag bags that were upwards of $100,000. Well, tonight the guys are going to be going home with a much cooler but less expensive swag bag.
Wow.
We want to be sure that everybody heads over to Amazon because we got some really great gear, including these little pop sockets that people put on their iPhones, especially for us ladies. This is actually, thank you, Patriarchy, for creating these, because it makes it easier to text with our small hands, and it works really well.
Those tiny, delicate little hands.
Elisha, I think it's unfair of you to just assume that because men invented literally every damn thing, that they also invented pop sockets.
That you also invented these?
Yeah, that doesn't seem fair. My favorite thing is the...
Hold on, sorry, Jared, I just looked it up. Men also invented pop sockets.
But you know what you didn't invent? Spanx, and thank God for those. Also, thank God for our amazing Daily Wire subscribers. We do have some subscriber questions.
Guys, she's on fire today.
I know, I should really.
We should just go.
All you had to do was call her a prostitute, and it changed everything.
It's the baby I have. We
Yeah,
got
somebody
two
knocked her up. Oh,
levels
my
of
God.
creativity going on here. Two girls ready to take you guys down. All right. But we have some awesome subscriber questions, all related to the Academy Awards last night. This first question comes from Philip. He says, people seem to look for moral and philosophical leadership from famous people, like actors and politicians, or Michael Knowles. Do you think this is part of human nature, and should we try to do something to change this?
Well, I'll take a crack at it and say that for people who haven't visited Hollywood before, there really is like a Babylonian motif that Hollywood deliberately steers into. Like if you go down to the Hollywood and Highland Center, which is where the Academy Awards take place, that's the home of the Dolby Theater, is right down the block, is literally a block away from the Roosevelt Hotel where the first Academy Awards took place. And its complete aesthetic is Babylonian mysticism, right? So in other words, my point is that idolatry is a sort of winked at, if not openly celebrated aspect of Hollywood. And so yeah, stars are a kind of modern idol. And it's kind of funny to call them modern because one of the things that the Academy Awards really brought home to me last night is that Hollywood is dying.
Yeah.
The movies in particular, TV's kind of in a golden era. The movies are dying.
You know, they were this close to basically writing themselves out of existence. If Roma wins Best Picture, they're toast. Because Roma only appeared in theaters for purposes of Oscar bait. Roma is on Netflix.
That's right.
If Roma had won, then the streaming services would have produced the best movie in Hollywood. And streaming services would have completely been on the path to, they still are. They were basically on the path to wiping out theater movies.
Yeah. But I think that before, we discussed on the show before what happened to Hollywood, so we don't have to relitigate the whole thing today. There were the two really ill-conceived Writers Guild strikes that happened right in a row at the beginning of reality television, at the beginning of YouTube. But the result of those things is that the movie star, who historically was an idol, just like 10 years before, the rock star, who was also an idol figure, was diminished by Napster. And then the two Writers Guild strikes and a few other bad decisions in Hollywood brought the movie star low. So the funny thing is, I don't think people look to movie stars to be their intellectual, philosophical, and religious idols anymore. I think they did for about a century. I think one of the things that Hollywood hasn't tuned into yet is that people don't care what they think in the way that Hollywood used to be able to move the needle. Stalin tried to, and maybe even succeeded at, taking over Hollywood. That's what gave us Ronald Reagan. Because Hollywood was so influential. And I really think today, Maya Rudolph walks out to give the opening jokes, can't help but immediately take a crack at the audience, the people who watch
64 million people.
And I think everybody just yawns. I don't think anybody really cares what they think.
There's something else going on too, and I totally agree with you, obviously, about the idolatry. The truth is that what social science tends to show is for the same reason that there's a great experiment, one of my favorite social science experiments. If you take somebody and you put them out on a street corner and you just have them look up, like at nothing, like just have them look up, then within 5 minutes there'll be a crowd of people standing around that person looking up, because that's just what we're geared toward. We're geared toward sensing both threats and things we feel like other people are looking at. So if somebody starts to gain a level of fame, everybody starts to look at the person who is famous. I don't think that it's a matter of Hollywood stars are no longer relevant. I think it's that there is no such thing as a Hollywood star anymore. The only way that fame existed before was we all knew the people who were on our movie screens, or we knew the people who were on our TV screens. There's a whole level of fame that I would say that virtually no generation above the age of 25 knows about. YouTube stars are stars, right? YouTube stars are actually the new movie stars. There are people with 98 million followers on YouTube, and those people actually are change and taste makers when it comes to this sort of stuff. But going all the way back to the Bible and Saul being selected because he was a head taller than everybody else, there has been this idea that the movie star matinee idol has something to do with all of this.
It is a difference, though, that it used to be when the actors came to town, you locked up your daughters. They were disreputable. They were the lowest level, like Knowles.
For instance, for all the history of the arts, actors have been lumped in with prostitutes.
Well, really, and now the fact that I think people still feel the same way about them, except that they also worship their beauty and they worship their style. I'm not sure if people ever listen to their opinions. I think movies move the needles. I'm not sure movie stars ever did.
Well,
they worship their beauty and their prostitutes. Alicia, do you have one more question for us?
Jeez Louise, taking it hard on the chin
I'm sorry,
today,
I'm standing
Alicia.
between you guys.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that some prostitutes probably make a lot more money than I do.
Wow, she's owning it today. It's amazing.
Also, the MSRP of this ain't much, folks. So you should head over to Amazon right now and check out our gear. Next question comes from Mike, who's a subscriber, by the way. He thought it was worth spending $99 so he could get a Leftist tear tumbler and ask you guys a question.
We thank him.
What was the last Best Picture that you actually felt deserved the award?
Wow, jeez.
Now I need to look up a history.
Yeah,
of
you
Best
have to
Picture.
look
That
I'm
is
gonna
the
Google
problem. That is the problem.
I don't even remember.
Gone with the Wind won.
Yeah, but The Wizard of Oz is a better movie.
The Wizard of Oz is a great movie, but not Gone with the Wind is a great movie.
I think The Wizard of Oz is the greatest achievement in the history of Hollywood.
I think there's a solid case to be made for it.
I think The Wizard of Oz is the best
I think
Hollywood
it's
ever.
a
glorious.
great movie, and I wouldn't even argue. I mean, I think it's Casablanca myself, but even so.
But here's the
No,
thing.
Casablanca may be a better
is
movie, but
fabulous.
Wizard of Oz is a greater achievement.
That's
It's,
correct.
it's an
Oh,
artistic
okay.
achievement,
That's
building an
interesting.
entire other world.
Yeah.
That one, I mean, my grandmother told me she saw it in the theaters, that when she went to the theater and actually saw it, and suddenly Dorothy opens the door,
Yeah.
and then it's in color. That one shot like changed the world. It's a world-changing shot. It's an incredible thing.
When I was a kid, the only color TV was owned by a guy who lived across our backyard. We would walk over every year to see The Wizard of Oz, and then I was like 3, and every time the witch came, I would get scared and have to go home. So for years, I never saw the entire movie.
You know, I got to tell you, the one that won in 2014 was Birdman, which no one liked because it was very indulgent. I actually really liked it because I'm very
Shocker, big
indulgent.
freaking shock. It's a garbage movie and you're a garbage person.
I only agree with half of that. I agree you're a garbage person, but I thought
the movie was okay.
the movie was okay.
You know, the actual, I mean, No Country for Old Men was good. The
No
Departed
Country
was
was
good.
fabulous.
Gladiator, I think, was actually the last really great Best Picture winner.
I'll say, are we saying great Best Picture winners or ones that you enjoyed? Because I'll say that in 2010, The King's Speech won, which I enjoyed.
Decent
Which I
movie,
enjoyed.
yeah.
And let's see, No Country for Old Men before that.
But I would
But
never
it's
watch
few
The
and far
King's Speech
between. And then
again.
you go back to the 30s and 40s, and every
Movie,
year,
and the ones that
every
lost
single
are
year.
the ones that lost are classics.
This is exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you go back to, I mean, I'm not going to do 1939 because that's unfair.
Yeah.
Because 1939 is the best year in the history of
In the
film.
history-
Right.
I mean, it's
everything's
Gone
down
with the
to
Wind,
that.
Dark
people know
Victory,
that?
Goodbye. These were just the pictures nominated for Best Picture. And the year before was Adventures of Robin Hood.
Yeah.
And
And the thing is, they were not
1939 was.
only nominated for Best Picture, they were also the top of the box office,
This is-
which is the art that Hollywood
Well,
has
this
lost,
is the
right?
other thing is that there came a point in American culture where the left decided that it was very bad that the American people were becoming cultured. This is in the 1950s, because the truth is that in the 1950s, more Americans bought a ticket for a symphony orchestra than bought a ticket to a baseball game.
Really?
I mean, yes,
I did not know
Americans
that.
actually Americans were buying the Harvard Classics
Yeah.
during that period.
Yep.
Like tens of thousands of Americans every year were subscribing to the Harvard Classics. Americans, like the newfound prosperity of the 50s after World War II, was being channeled toward a betterment of actual knowledge.
Yeah.
And the left decided that because they were making the case that capitalism actually emptied you out because they were in league with sort of a Marxist philosophy, they started seeing this as bourgeois. And so anything that was popular had to, by necessity, be bourgeois. And so it became, okay, now the stuff that really is good is the stuff that people don't like. Because the more they don't, it's like, in my view, what happened to Stephen Sondheim in theater. If you look at Stephen Sondheim in theater, every musical that he did beyond Sweeney Todd, he started getting more and more and more obscure because he actually doesn't like the audience. He thinks that the audience, if they get him, it's a lack on his part.
Yep.
He hasn't been sophisticated enough. And so if you look at Sondheim's stuff, beyond Sweeney and Into the Woods, it starts to go into assassins and passion. It's like that with the movies too. They've decided that they will not, and the only movie that they feel like they'll reward that did really big box office is Black Panther because they feel they have to.
Not to let the left off the hook, but this is what happens when art forms age. They get taken over by intellectuals, and they split into empty entertainments and intellectual things, some of which are good. Ulysses is a good novel, but who reads it? Nobody understands it except people like intellectuals.
But I think this was a deliberate. I think this was a murder of an industry. I think it was a suicide of an industry. I think that everybody here, everybody in this business knows that what pays the bills is Avengers: Infinity War, and they're all embarrassed that Avengers: Infinity War pays the bills, so they go and they make Birdman.
But it's not a memorable movie.
No, I'm going to go a step further than that and say they know that Avengers: Infinity War is what pays the bills, but they don't know how to make Avengers: Infinity War transcend.
That's
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
They
That's
actually
it.
don't know
It's
how to
not
make
an
it
actual
great.
good movie. That's right.
It's a
Not-
good movie.
not a great movie,
It's
yeah.
a good movie.
Yeah.
They
But there's
don't know
no,
how
but
to
there's
make
no,
it great.
there's no meaning to it. Like they used to be able to unify meaning with story. They understood the limitations of their craft.
Yeah.
Were actually in some ways helpful. You have to please people and also bring a deeper meaning in there.
Yeah.
Like Casablanca is a great potboiler that also happens to have an enormous amount of deep meaning on a variety of levels.
It is interesting when they succeeded in that film Logan, which is actually a good movie.
Yeah.
Nobody knew.
Logan should have won Best Picture.
I mean, nobody knew
Logan,
it was a good
Logan
movie.
was the best film of
Here,
its
by
year.
the way, here are the movies from 1939. Gone with the Wind, Dark Victory, Goodbye Mr. Chips, Love Affair, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Ninotchka, Of Mice and Men, Stagecoach, The Wizard of Oz, and Wuthering Heights.
And every single one of them you can watch.
Everyone
today.
is a classic.
I
Everyone
actually
is a
had
classic.
forgotten about Wuthering Heights, another tremendous film. Yeah.
So, Stamps.com.
Stamps.com. I love Stamps.com.
They are an actual sponsor of ours.
Yes, and I love them.
This is my worst segue.
That was a
yet.
great transition.
It was
What are
my
you
worst
talking about?
transition of all time,
was
you
great.
It was a
guys.
triumph. It was a triumph of segueing
That was-
dumb.
that-
And it's unfair because like Stamps.com actually helps us run our business. Not only because they sponsor us, but also because stamps. We need stamps,
But
and nobody wants to go to the post office.
in LA, if the post office is 5 minutes away, it's 3 hours away.
That's
so
right,
it
yeah.
really makes a difference
You
to have
can't
it
go
on
to
your
the post
computer.
office.
That's right.
The
Stamp
fact
size.
is, nobody has time to go to the post office, and you can save money on all the great services that you get at the post office when you go to Stamps.com. Stamps.com is one of the most popular time-saving tools for small businesses. It eliminates trips to the post office and saves you money with discounts you can't even get at the post office. They bring all the amazing services of the U.S. Postal Service direct to your computer. Whether you're a small office sending invoices or an online seller shipping out products, Stamps.com can handle it all with ease. Doesn't matter, you can have a warehouse full of stuff, and you can still use Stamps.com. Simply use your computer to print official U.S. postage 24/7 for any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere you want to send it. With Stamps.com, you get 5 cents off every first-class stamp and up to 40% off priority mail. It's a no-brainer. There's a reason why 700,000 small businesses already use Stamps.com, including the Daily Wire. Right now, our listeners get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale without any long-term commitment, which is a solid deal. Go over, check them out right now at Stamps.com. Click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Shapiro. That's Stamps.com. Enter Shapiro. I use it personally. It's a great service. Go check them out. Stamps.com. Click on that microphone at the top of the homepage. Type in Shapiro. You get that 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale with no long-term commitment. It's about as good a deal as you can get.
Yeah, I want to talk about something John Nolte observed last night that I thought was such a fabulous point. He said that the real problem, the reason that the Oscars are no good, sure, they condescend, sure, they openly disdain their audience, sure, they're puffed up and self-important, but the real problem is there just aren't any movie stars.
The movies are bad. Oh,
No, there are no movie stars.
Okay.
His great observation was they opened the show. Tina Fey, Maya Rudolph, and
Exactly.
Amy Poehler.
Amy Poehler.
Yeah.
I think all three fabulously talented, very funny. They're TV stars. They're stars of the small screen. They have appeared in some movies, but they are not movie stars. The day of the movie star is over.
It's gone. And
It's
people
gone.
people did go to the movies to see a Jimmy Stewart
yes,
movie.
and people tuned into the Academy Awards
Yeah.
because these weren't people who lived their lives in front of us all day, every day. They were mysterious.
Yeah.
They were from another world. They descended down from Babylon, right? And then we paid money and went into a dark room and projected them up there. That is a different power than people who beam into your living room and you sit in your underwear and flick through and see them.
There were people hired to protect their reputations. The idea that you would protect an actor's reputation today is laughable. If he goes into rehab, he has to tell us all about it. They're just people now, which that may be a healthy thing in some ways, but it's also ruined the industry.
Your point is totally correct. I have a cousin who's a legit movie star. I mean, people know this on Wikipedia. My cousin was Mara Wilson, who is the star of Matilda and Miracle on 34th Street. We grew up around the corner from each other. And her mom was my dad's sister. And one of the reasons that her mom never wanted her to get into TV when she was younger, I remember her saying this to my dad, was because with movie stars, there was a certain unapproachability.
Yeah.
You didn't feel like you knew them. You felt like they're up there on the screen. They're of a different caliber. And then when you bring them down into your TV, then it's the same feeling that they have about watching your show or my show, or maybe Knowles' show if somebody watches that thing.
They still are filled with deep awe and veneration for my show.
But people feel like they know you. Like on
you have a show,
TV,
right?
people feel like they're friends with you, right?
Yeah.
On TV, people feel like they're friends with you
You've
and they
been in
know
their
you,
living room.
right? They literally, you bring them into your home.
That's right.
And as
But let me
opposed
make
to
an
going,
argument why this is a good thing, okay? Because, and I obviously have a bias here, but it emphasizes story. It emphasizes the writer. You watch TV because the stories are good, and the stories are good because the writer is king.
No, I
they
totally-
treat writers like garbage in the movie industry, and they get what they pay for.
So I totally agree that it is a good thing for story. I would much rather watch. I mean, I spent the last several weeks going through old episodes of The Sopranos,
greatest
because
TV show of our
because now I can
lifetime.
stream it
Yeah.
full scale,
Yeah.
and it's great. And at some point, I want your guys' analysis of the finale because I'm 10 years late on this thing. But in any case,
Maybe the greatest episode of television.
it's a pretty astonishing show. But you're right about all of that. But I do think that there is such a thing as the culture fragmenting. So I think to a certain extent, there was something good about the idea of on a certain night every year, everybody was going to get together and watch The Wizard of Oz. When there were cultural events, we still feel it in America. That every so often there's like the Super Bowl is a cultural event, and it's good for the country. Everybody stops shouting at each other for 5 minutes. And it's actually good. I think one of the big problems with the Oscars is not only is it an event we used to share, it's now become so politically polarizing. I think that it's actually a problem. I think that it was something where we all got together and we oohed and ahed at certain aspects of the movie making, and we also had rooting interests. Like imagine how many more people. I would have watched the Oscars if this year it were. I love The Death of Stalin, but if this year the Oscars had actually been Into the Spider-Verse versus A Quiet Place. Versus, frankly, something like Game Night. When was the last time they nominated an actual? When was the last time they nominated a comedy?
Right.
They'll never nominate a comedy, and if they do, it's going to be like an actual drama. It'll be a dramedy, like Little Miss Sunshine or something. They'll never nominate an out-and-out comedy because they look down on it. But one of the very first Oscar winners, It Happened One Night, is an out-and-out comedy. There are a bunch of out-and-out comedies that won the early Oscars. That notion that we all got together and watched something together is gone now, and that's what is so. People on the left are like, so why are you so frustrated at the Oscars when they do this leftist stuff, when you know they're going to do the leftist stuff? And it's because you took something away from us. I used to sit around the TV with my parents when I was a kid, and we all used to watch the Oscars together. And then around 2003, 2004, I vividly remember this. We used to watch the Oscars, all of us as a family, and sort of enjoy it. And then around 2003, 2004, like the crash time, they started to really get openly political.
And then Michael Moore in 2003?
I think that's right. And I remember every year, my mom and sisters would want to watch for all the dresses and stuff. And my dad would walk in every 15 minutes and go, why are you watching this bleep? And walk out. And it got to the point where it's like, we don't want to watch this anymore because why would we want to watch this? And it wasn't just my dad ruining it, although he was. It was also the fact that he wasn't wrong about that. Like it was political preaching guised as entertainment. And it was deeply, deeply irritating.
And this is a real change, by the way. I mean, there was every few years, Brando sends a Native American to receive an award, or Patty Chayefsky gives that actually great speech shooting down anti-Semitism. But then when Michael Moore did his speech about how awful George Bush is, half of that audience booed him. Imagine that today. Not a single person would boo him. Steve Martin came out and made a joke about the Teamsters throwing Michael Moore in the trunk of a car, and people applauded that. There was actually a sense, this is not right. We shouldn't be politicizing the Oscars. Fast forward 15 years now, people don't even remember that.
And there's a reason, too, is because our government has reached into every segment of our lives. In the old days, the government could do stupid stuff and you never knew about it. It always shocked me when I lived in England that the government would pass a law and 2 days later you would feel it, because it's a small country. Here, that didn't used to happen. The government was smaller and it didn't reach into every aspect of your life. And so politics, you could argue politics and not feel like you were arguing about your own life. You felt you were arguing philosophy. Now, with a government this big, a government where the President of the United States can talk about who should be allowed into men's rooms and girls' rooms in schools in Arkansas, someplace he's probably never even been except on a fast train. That's a government that's way too big.
In the 50s, if the president wanted to have a say in who got to go into a school, he sent the National Guard. Like it was a big deal. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
It wasn't a tweet. It wasn't a tweet.
But it's also true that Hollywood has embraced its political role in an insane way. I mean, so last night, Representative John Lewis showed up on the stage of the Oscars to talk about Green Book. Now, John Lewis, everyone has veneration for him and should for what he did during the Civil Rights Movement, of course. He's a partisan Democrat.
Right.
He showed up to introduce a movie that 50 years after the Civil Rights Movement? And he's not the only Democrat who's done this. Joe Biden was on that stage. Michelle Obama showed up at the Grammys 2 weeks ago. I mean, when was the last time?
Barack and Michelle, as president, showed up at the Oscars.
Yeah, they filmed it. They filmed a video for it.
Yeah.
There never will be a Republican who actually appears there.
No, the best way for a Republican to appear there is if a movie destroying their reputation appears as a nominee for Best Picture. And we haven't talked about Vice, and it's probably beneath our dignity almost to talk about Vice.
Oh, I think it's an important picture.
Can you?
You seen it?
Yes.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah. And it's a fantasy. It's like watching a Hallmark movie. I watch Hallmark movies to find out what girls dream about. You watch Vice to find out what left-wing Democrats
There is a scene in Vice that is not just stretching reality, that is just factually inaccurate. Scooter Libby says Valerie Plame is that writer's wife. And then Dick Cheney says, leak her identity. Yeah. We know that didn't happen. There was a big investigation. It was Richard Armitage who leaked that identity.
But the director of the film, in an interview, was asked about this. And they said, but we know that it was Armitage who released it. And he goes, we know it was Cheney, right? It was Cheney, right?
It was Cheney.
And he's an open socialist, Adam McKay. He is a socialist. He made a movie about the crash. It was a pretty decent movie. The
Big Short.
The Big Short. But they never mentioned the fact that that crash started with left-wing policies causing them to give loans to people who couldn't pay them back, guaranteed by the government, which then spread through Wall Street. So there was blame to put on the left and the right, but they only put it on one side. That's the movie.
And I know it goes without saying, but imagine for a moment that someone on the right was able to come up with $65 million to make a movie about a major movie with one of the few true movie stars, Christian Bale.
I had a bunch of movie stars. Amy Adams
Amy
was in
Adams,
that film.
yeah.
Sam Rockwell was in that
and
film.
good performances.
True movie stars. About how Barack Obama was actually just a pot-smoking hipster Chicago guy, shoom gang guy, without a real thought in his head. But Joe Biden was really running the government. You know, the old white guy was really doing all the work. It would be just as fanciful.
Right.
Well,
Joe Biden's never done any work in his life.
Incomprehensible.
By the way, you don't even have to imagine this, because there was a miniseries that is an excellent miniseries that was made about 9/11 by Cyrus Nowrasteh, in which he pointed out that Bill Clinton completely botched Osama bin Laden, and that he failed to take a shot at Osama bin Laden. ABC not only pulled the miniseries after one showing, despite massive ratings, it is not available for distribution anywhere.
Won't do it.
And people have offered them millions of dollars to buy it out in lockup. They will not release it.
Do you
it's
know,
amazing.
And the funny thing is, it's not even.
I wrote a piece for the Washington Post mentioning this, and they cut it out. And
Of course they did.
I said, put it back in, because the whole thing was about censoring right-wingers. I said, don't you understand that you're exemplifying what I'm talking about? And they said, yeah, we're not doing it. No. The only time an op-ed editor has ever said that to me, it was the Washington Post.
But you still write your weekly column for the Washington Post, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, democracy does in
But
darkness.
by the way, that documentary not nearly as critical of the Clintons as Vice is. I mean,
no.
Not even in the realm.
Vice is a fantasy. I mean, Bush is an idiot, and Cheney is running everything. And Cheney, on top of being a loving husband and father, is a completely morally empty guy who bombs a country to make money off oil. And we know this stuff isn't true. We know that Bush
we didn't
was
get
not
the
a
damn
stupid-
money. As our president said.
Sonny Bunch over at Free Beacon, he said that he actually enjoyed it because he watched it as like a right-wing fantasy.
Yeah.
Like what?
You know, in the beginning of that movie, for those who didn't see it, so everybody, it says, the reason that we've taken liberties here is because Dick Cheney is one of the most secretive men in the history of the U.S. government.
That's right.
The man has been in the public eye for over 40 years.
500-page autobiography.
Yeah.
We know everything about this guy, but of course they couldn't read the autobiography or anything else, so they make up facts wholesale.
And the fact that it was nominated for an Oscar was a gigantic screw you to every single person who's a Republican, which is what, you know, it's still
if you're
half
one of the
country.
60 million people who voted for this guy to become
By the
vice
way,
president.
the fact that somebody signed a $65 million check for that movie is a big screw you.
So let me ask you this.
$65 million for a movie that's going to earn $10 at the box
But let
office.
me
Who
ask
the hell,
you-
what's the audience for that? Who's the wild audience going, you know what I need? I need to go see a movie about Dick Cheney today.
Let me ask all you guys this. I want to hear what you have to say about this, because it drives me a little crazy. We complain about this, rightfully, it should be complained about. But why don't we make those movies? Why don't we make that movie about Barack Obama? Why don't we make the movie?
Yeah, give me $65 million.
Well, I mean,
no.
Is it not available? Is it?
That is the answer.
We're supposed to be the rich guys. We're supposed to have all the billion.
Yeah, prove it. You know, show me the rich billionaire in Silicon Valley who's a open
Bezos isn't going to fund your movie.
Yeah.
No, but
Show me the filmmaker, the successful filmmakers.
Well, it's because conservatives. I mean, we've talked about this for legitimately a decade at this point. I mean, I wrote an entire book on TV and made all these speeches in front of rich people saying that we need to get in the culture. And then I realized that it was not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because conservatives they're like dolphins that sleep with half their brains on and half their brains off. Yeah. When our political brains are on, we want to give money to candidates, to the Heritage Foundation. We want to subscribe to Daily Wire. Right? We want to get into the nitty-gritty of politics and make a difference. And the most direct way to make a difference is to give money into politics. And when our do-gooder brain is on, then we want to give money to our church. That's where we put our money. We put our money in our churches and in our communities. And when our business brain is on, we look at the movie business, and we're not idiots.
It's not a
and
good
we say there is no money here.
It's a
why would I
business.
Why would I sink $20 million I will never see again to make a movie that is going to be distributed next to, you know, the man who killed Hitler and Bigfoot on Amazon within 6 weeks? And like that's not a good business investment. So conservatives are hamstrung by their own direct do-gooderism and also by their own need to make money off business. What you actually need is why Hollywood was founded by conservatives but taken over by the left, just like every other major industry.
Else,
is you need a bunch of people to start a new form of the industry and invest in it when it's still profitable, and not to invest in movies. I wouldn't invest in movies, would you?
No, but I mean, it's.
So then why are you asking people who are richer than you to invest in movies?
Because they own Twitter, they own YouTube. These are money-making things. I mean, Facebook. These are all money-making.
Right. That's the business model. Explain to me how sinking $50 million into a biopic of Barack Obama makes money.
No, but still, why are those left-wing organizations too? Why is every social outreach?
Because conservatives
business?
don't understand culture.
It's also because there's also no prestige to it. So meaning that a leftist will take money and sink it into a movie so they can go to all their friends and say, I put money into Vice. What conservative is going to go around and say, I put money into this movie? You think that works at the church group? What they want to hear is I gave $1 million to World Vision or something, right? I gave $1 million to my church. I gave $2 million to Mitt Romney's super PAC. It doesn't cut you go to a Heritage Foundation party. You think it cuts ice to say I sunk $10 million into a biopic of Barack Obama? It doesn't cut a dime's worth of ice. None.
Yeah.
But you're saying though it is an attitude on the right. The right is actually does not care about the.
Well, the right is the right believes, correctly in one sense and wrong in the other, that if culture is upstream of politics, what is upstream of culture is church going and community.
Right.
And that's true, but it's also true that the more money that you give to those areas does not necessarily mean that those areas are going to win. The culture can take away the gains of the religious community. That's what we've found over the last 60 years. That's the great.
Well, the thing is, the culture works.
Culture.
The culture, like socialism, takes 70 years to destroy a country, so that the people who put it in there don't have to answer to the people who suffer from it. It's the same thing with culture. It's 30 years down the line. We're always fighting over some congressional district in Delaware.
We're always fighting over the most important election of our lifetime.
That's right. That's right.
The most important election of our lifetime.
Right.
And we're doing nothing about what happens after that election.
Right.
Like,
well, because we're not in the
forward-looking
business
in
of
that way.
thinking about politics full time.
Right.
When we think about eternity, we don't think about politics. Really, I mean, religious people, when we think about eternity, we think about going to shul or going to church and what happens after I die and what happens to my kids and all this kind of stuff. We don't think my legacy is going to be this. Like, you've written movies. When you die as a religious person, what is your legacy going to be?
What is my?
Well, I mean, we're talking 5 minutes from now. So 5 minutes from now, what are we going to be talking about?
No, I hope some of the things I've written will, last. That's
right. But if I were to say to you, you only get to pick 3 things on your tombstone, what do they say?
Probably that I wrote a couple of good novels and was a good father and had a good life.
I would figure not in that order. I figure not in that order.
Not in order.
Right. That's the point.
Here lies Jeremy. He never flew in a private jet.
But this is the point. I think that not in that order is the key point I'm trying to make.
I see.
I think that
you're right.
For folks on the left, good father and good husband don't even make the top 100.
You think so?
Well, in Hollywood. Are you kidding?
Well, in Hollywood, not in Hollywood. Yeah.
Not on the left generally. There are plenty of good people on the left who care about being a parent or a husband or something. But the people in Hollywood, you ask them what is their greatest contribution, and they're gonna send you their IMDb page.
Well, I mean, the thing is, most leftists live conservative lives. A lot of good left wingers live conservative lives. They just won't preach what they practice.
Right.
I want to talk for a minute about something that. Little controversy that we found ourselves in with our friends over at Calm. They advertise on our shows. They've always been great partners. We've had a good relationship with them all along. But you may remember back in January, we broadcast the Ben Shapiro show live from the March for Life. And, we're big fans of the March for Life. That's an important event to us, something that we're going to support, always have and always will. Unfortunately, we didn't think about the effect that would have on some of our sponsors like Calm. Calm wound up being associated online by some people with the March for Life event. And we didn't contemplate the fact that they would be perceived as not only sponsoring the show, the Ben Shapiro show, but that you might be able to infer that they had sponsored the event itself, which of course they did not do. I think it was a fair concern for Calm to have. We didn't consider the implication that people could perceive them as a sponsor of the event. And Calm's job is not politics. They're a great business. Like most of our advertisers, they're not a political company. And they don't want to make a stand on these hot-button political issues one way or the other. And they shouldn't. That's not the purpose of business. They're a business, they're a meditation app, and their job is to be the #1 source of meditation, mindfulness, and sleep for everyone, regardless of politics. And we kind of complicated that, put them in a tough position. But the good news is we've had some great conversations with them over the last few weeks, and because we've had a strong relationship all along with them, and they were receptive to communicating with us, we're going to be working with them again. Calm's going to be back on our shows. I think that some of the concern when something like this happens is, is Calm attacking our audience? Are they saying that they don't want conservative customers? That's just not the case. They want all people who are interested in meditation, who are interested in mindfulness, who are interested in a healthier lifestyle. And we're grateful that organizations like Calm would advertise on our show. It's not always the easiest thing for an advertiser to get involved in something that could be deemed political or controversial in any way. So, I think for people watching who may feel a loyalty to us, and they see Calm coming back on, we couldn't be happier about it. It's the result of some great productive conversations, and we believed in the product before all this happened. It's still a great product, so we'll be getting to talk about them a little bit more kind of over the coming weeks. I think starting with you.
Good. Well, good. I love them. I use them, and I love them. They actually work. One of the things I
love anybody who will advertise on your show.
One of the things I love about this is the only compliment I'm going to pay to you in your lifetime, is that you have always let us vet the sponsors and make our decisions whether we want to do it. So everything we advertise, we actually like, which is great. It makes you feel good when you come to work. Yeah. That's the nicest thing I'm going to ever say about you. Yeah.
Here's the nice thing I'm ever going to say about you. Alicia, do you have any questions for us from our Daily Wire subscribers?
Oh, sorry. Just looking up new on-air gigs.
She's so spicy.
She is.
Also, facts don't care about your feelings. This pop socket does come in handy, so everybody should head over to Amazon and get that. Here's a fact, in case y'all didn't know. Ben Shapiro does not want to be here, and he doesn't care about Jeremy Boring's feelings. Also, I'm doing pretty good with the bingo, so I hope everyone's still joining us and playing their Backstage bingo. Head over to the Daily Wire Twitter account @RealDailyWire, and I think it's over there on Instagram too, so you can play along with me and you can catch up. Some of these things have happened. They've been done. All right, this next question comes from an awesome subscriber named Rustum. He says, do you think the reason behind why all the nominated movies are old movies is that leftists are trying to rewrite the context of that history?
Well, go ahead.
No, this is your point.
Well, I think it's because they don't have any new ideas. When I listen to the left, they call themselves progressives, and I think that's appropriate because they're kind of like emphysema or cancer. They are a progressive disease, but they're the most progressive ideas on earth. I mean, socialism was debunked. I mean, socialism, it was debunked. The thing that we tried, people tried it. I understand why they tried it. It sounded good. It failed. Nobody, I was watching Bernie Sanders from a cut from 1988, and he's saying, "Oh, the Soviet Union is doing great." 3 years before it collapsed in chaos. 3 years.
I mean, it is very possible that Bernie Sanders was around St. Petersburg when he felt it was time for a change. That guy's been around for a long time.
Czar. But I mean,
I said his campaign slogan should be, "At least I personally knew Marx."
But I mean, I think that they are stuck in this world. They cannot let go of the racist thing. Yeah. We all know that there was a real serious problem for black people in this country. We all know that leaves a mark. Nobody's making fun of that. But after a while, the thing is, you got to let go. You have to, because history won't fix itself. Only the future can fix itself, And I think they are not forward-looking people. I think that the conservatives that I talk to are all thinking about how can we go forward in such a way that we keep the best things about this country, the freedom, the limited government, but also go into a future that's going to be complicated and going to have things we've never seen before. I never hear the left talking about this. All I hear them saying is 12 years from now, we're all going to be dead, therefore let us take over everything. That is a very, very small-minded, regressive way to look.
I think that's totally right. And I think that when you look at the history, the fact that they've been making all of these films about history, it's difficult to make the argument that today America is a deeply terrible racist country.
It really
and so
is,
instead what they do is they point to a time when America did have a serious race problem and when Americans were a lot more racist than they are now. And then they add a tag. So that's what Spike Lee does in Black Klansman. So he tells you a story that happened in 1980 or 1977 or something. And he tells you about a time when the KKK was still operative and was still a major force in American life. And he does the whole story. And then at the very end, he has a little tag about President Trump in Charlottesville. It's like, oh, fast forward, boom, here's the little tag punch. Are we even pretending here?
Really? I mean, really?
Are you really pretending that the two are comparable? And the attempt to compare the two by skipping over the entire intervening history is really morally and intellectually bankrupt. But that's I think, what they're trying to do. I think that's why they keep going back to this. It's as though you were making the case every day that America were a deeply anti-Semitic country, and every film you decided to produce was Gentleman's Agreement. It was every film you decided to produce was about a time when Jews couldn't join country clubs.
Right.
And you'd look around at America and you'd say, wait a second, Jews are doing pretty well over here. Right? Jews seem to be doing okay. And yet, but that undercuts the case. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
It undercuts the case.
And
I made the mistake of criticizing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez one time on Twitter.
Wow.
And
How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare I?
She's very fresh and very face.
So fresh.
She's the fresh
so
face of
face.
the Democratic
So face.
faceness, freshness like you can't believe.
And people keep writing in and saying things like, "Women were only got the vote in 1920." Like, yeah, that's a century. you would
400
have
years
a
ago.
great point if it was 1920. I feel that way about all their. You would have a great point about racism if it were the 1860s, even if
Even
it was the
1960s.
1960s. Yeah. It is not.
But that's why all these pictures are so old. And
By
that's
the way,
why they
did you
keep
see?
going back.
You saw this AOC video over the weekend,
Oh,
right?
it's great.
The Cash
I
Me
loved
Outside video of AOC explaining that. Can we play it just because it was so great? Her explaining that she was the boss. She is in fact the
She's
boss.
the boss. Yeah.
Do we have that video, guys?
Everybody
Maybe
dive
not.
We
back
don't
there.
have that video, but we do have another question from a Daily Wire subscriber. Listen, if I have to choose between talking about the news or answering questions from the people who actually pay
Oh.
for my house,
Easy.
I am 100% going with the people who pay for my house.
I have a quick question, though. Am I allowed? I am a subscriber. I just noticed something. Do Lady Gaga, Donald Trump, and Michael Knowles go to the same tanning lounge?
Stop that. Get out of here. This is all natural, baby. I'm on the intersectional hierarchy. Sicilians in this country have suffered. I'm going to start making movies about it.
Just the juxtaposition of like vampire Shapiro next to like spray tan Knowles gets me every time. This question comes from Jonathan. He wants to know, should obscene or pornographic media be regulated by government? And is it an infringement on the First Amendment?
Ben, you're the lawyer.
Okay, so
who wrote a book about pornography.
Right. So there are two answers. Is it an infringement on the First Amendment to pass legislation that regulates pornography? The answer is no. The First Amendment was designed to protect originally political speech. It was not designed to protect pornography. Adams and Jefferson and Washington were not sitting around thinking, these dirty wood carvings, we must protect the dirty wood carvings from 1780.
It was not, at the time it was ratified, it was not commonly understood that you could trade in smut and have pornography.
Right. Well, not only that, it was commonly understood that you could regulate it. I mean, pornography regulations existed on the books in literally all 13 colonies when the Constitution was originally passed. So to suggest that the First Amendment, by its nature, protects pornography is simply untrue. It was meant to protect political speech. Robert Bork has a seminal article about this before he was nominated for the Supreme Court in the 1970s. So that's the constitutional argument. Then there's the practical argument. Should the government be in the business of regulating pornography? And my answer to that is essentially no. The government should not be in the business of regulating pornography. And this is a change from a position that I held probably back when I was 21, 22. And I looked at this and I felt like a lot of this stuff is addictive material. The fact is that it does have brain effects that are very similar to addiction, particularly for men. And that if local communities want to regulate pornography, then they should have the ability to do so. So my feeling is that local communities still have a lot more ability to regulate than the federal government. In any, like, if you don't want to live in a community that doesn't allow porn shops, then move out of that community, find another community. I don't really have much of a problem with local communities experimenting with the extent of law. What I would say is that on a general level, and in my community, I would not regulate the distribution of pornography so long as it didn't have public display. The public display of pornography is different and has externalities. In terms of trying to regulate the distribution of pornography, you're fighting a battle against human nature that is likely to fail. For the same reason that I oppose the war on drugs, I also oppose a generalized war on pornography. That doesn't mean you can't have time, place, and manner restrictions, zoning restrictions. It doesn't mean that you have to have a billboard of a naked lady above your local elementary school. But it does mean that I think the government is pretty bad at everything, and a mandate for the government to get involved in certain areas of what is widely considered to be speech quickly tends to evolve into the government getting involved in other things. Once they start labeling stuff pornography, you can see them extending that. Well, is pornography really as damaging as, say, the Bible? The Bible perverts how you think about various issues. The left has no compunction about restricting.
Anything that they're allowed to regulate, violence. Now just everything they don't like is violence.
Yeah. Exactly.
Alicia.
All right, Anthony wants to know, what do you think a movie should accomplish in order for it to be nominated for an award?
It would be helpful if it were good. That would be if it were good, if it were art. I mean, this is actually another reason why conservatives often fail at the culture and fail at movies, is we're a little too on the nose, we're a little direct sometimes, and the left is very good at hiding itself. Until recently, until the last 2 years, they were even pretending that they're not socialists. And so if the movie is a work of art that isn't just some didactic, knock over the head political message, That would be a good start.
Yeah, and I think the mistake conservatives make is that conservative art does not look like conservative life. I mean, The Sopranos is a great work of conservative art. It doesn't look anything like conservative life. It has all kinds of violence and bad language, nudity, all those things, and yet it is a deeply, deeply moral and godly even story.
I was reading a book called Genesis the other day. Have you ever read Genesis?
Exactly. Well, people always say this to me. They say, "I don't need that stuff. I can read the Bible." And I thought, "Have you read the Bible?" My God.
But there is a question here that I think is an interesting one, which is very often what you'll hear is I'll say things like, "Why don't they nominate movies that people actually like?" And they'll say, "Well, that's not what the Oscars are for. The Oscars are for nominating stuff that the artists, that is more artistic, or like there's some other standard out there." I think that separation between what the people, this goes back to a discussion we were having earlier, the separation between what the people like and what is quote unquote artistic is an artificial separation that has begun in the last 30, 40 years. The Godfather was a massive box office smash.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, Star Wars was a massive box office smash. E.T. was a massive box office smash. Raiders of the Lost Ark was nominated for Best Picture. Raiders of the Lost Ark never gets nominated for Best Picture now because it's not deep, it's not profound. Even though the truth is that Raiders of the Lost Ark has some actual morality to it, right? I mean, it's actually saying that, like, in essence, it's saying there is something beyond what you think there is. It's actually a pretty good argument against scientism to a certain extent.
He was the last, Spielberg was the last director who could make films that everybody loved that were also great movies.
Right.
He really is the last guy. The other thing is, you and I have had this discussion where we disagreed about the movie Get Out. And one of the things I think that art does that offends conservatives is that it talks about the inner experience of being a human being in the world. And why I loved Get Out, and I really did think it was a good movie, a very good movie.
Yeah, you're totally wrong about this.
No, we disagreed. And I thought it actually talked about the fear when you assimilate, will you lose your soul? If I assimilate, will I lose my soul? It was a horror movie, so in the horror movie, you do lose your soul. But that's a human experience. That's a human fear, and I thought that was completely legitimate. I don't know what, I can't remember if it's Key or Peele.
Jordan Peele, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what he thinks about that. I don't care what he thinks about it. What the movie said to me is this is a fear that people have with assimilation. The Godfather was also about assimilation from a different point of view. You try to get out and they pull you back in, And I think that assimilation comes with costs and very deep scarring on people, and I think that Get Out really spoke to that.
This is something else, is I think the substitution of the visual in film for the plot-driven and character-driven in film has been a real problem, and this has been happening in the last 25 years.
It's a great point.
That if you look at Star Wars has a very, very good plot. It has a very good plot. It is a plot that's, it's based on Joseph Campbell, obviously, but it's a plot that actually hits marks, that makes sense, that is coherent, and that doesn't end with just, okay, now two big monsters hit each other, which is like how every big movie ends now, right? Every single big movie that you see in the theater that cost $100 million to make has the same ending. It's two giant monsters hitting each other with big explosions everywhere until the credits roll, and that's it. That's not good movie making.
No.
Right, and that's the difference. That's why The Dark Knight deserves to be nominated for Best Picture, but Infinity War doesn't. Because
why Logan should have been.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And
Because those actually hit some plot and character points.
Yes.
Right, and all the other movies that make a lot of money right now, people are only going. This is the big gap because of TV, because of streaming. The reason people are going to the movies right now is because you want to see something on the movie screen and pay $16 for it that you can't actually see in your own home.
Yeah.
So if you go to The Dark Knight changes things because you want to see it on the big screen and it fulfills all those things. But most movies we want to see on the big screen are just big spectacle movies.
Yeah.
And so Hollywood goes, fine, I can put together a spectacle movie in 5 minutes. It's formulaic. It has a big monster fight at the end, and then we're done. And they never try to link the two.
Right.
They never try to link anything of substance or plot. I mean, even Black Panther has the typical movie hero versus movie villain fight at the end with some rushing trains, and then it ends. And it's like, okay, well, that's the same thing as every other Marvel film.
So we couldn't get an actual Academy Award here, even though we've all taken our shots over the years. And so instead we have the Jaspies. The Jaspie Awards is how we're thinking of the evening. There it is. In honor of this small terrier, the chief executive dog of the Daily Wire. Yeah, he put on his best tux. And to make it a true award show worthy of its name, the Jaspie Awards, it's important that, like all other award shows, we celebrate those who we have lost this year. And that's why we're proud today at the Daily Wire to bring you In Memoriam. I mean,
Wow. What a
truly
year.
our hearts are with.
I didn't know Ginsburg died.
Okay, Media Matters explainer. Nobody here thinks Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. She's very much alive. We're not joking about her death. We're joking that there are some people who pretended that she died and thought she died. She's not
Ben.
actually.
If there's no picture, there's no proof. If there's no photo, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Michael, on the other hand.
That is sad, though, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a good day for me. At least this day ended well. I mean, in memoriam, an empty chair.
Yeah.
That's it. It says it all.
It ain't for Elijah, buddy. So it's rare when we do one of these shows that we have an actual expert on the subject that we're discussing.
Or somebody who knows anything. Yeah.
Lord knows it ain't us. We do have a guest to join us for the last piece of the show here. It's a pal of all of ours. Actually, somebody who's been an important mentor in my life. A guy who's made a big stand in Hollywood on behalf of Ben. That's our dear friend, Lionel Chetwynd. Lionel, join us.
Good evening.
And also one of the black guards. Of the,
One of the black guards?
The Black Watch, sorry.
Black
the Black
Watch,
Watch.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My Scottish blood, my 1026 Scottish blood.
Lionel coming to us from England by way of Canada, by way of basically being the only
Canadian.
Yes,
Black
of course.
Watch
Yes,
Royal
yes.
Highland Regiment of Canada.
Of Canada.
And I've lost a lot of weight, and so my dinner jacket doesn't fit me. But this does miracle of miracles.
Mine
Well,
doesn't.
you-
My jacket doesn't fit me today. It's not because I lost weight.
Well, the good news is that you're wearing a kilt, so that's an actual thing that men wear, as opposed to that guy at the Oscars who decided to wear like a full-on gown, which was stunning and brave. Don't get me wrong, stunning as
So
well as brave.
So brave.
There was a big issue when they took women into the army as to whether they should be allowed to wear the kilt. Because the kilt's it's for a laddie, eh? It's not for a wee lass. Well, you'd expect something silly at the Oscars, I think. I was promised cigars, I know you can.
I lit this for you, knowing you were coming on stage, and then
Oh, so
I
kind.
allowed it to go out, which was rude of me. But this is my favorite cigar. It's a 9-year aged Monte Cristo Añejado.
Oh, well.
And if you need fire, we have fire. So Lionel,
Aye, lad.
I think, has been the most outspoken, probably conservative voice in Hollywood throughout his career. But to reduce him down to that would miss his huge body of work as a writer and a director in town. We're not big on long bios on our show, but more than anyone, you've moved for the last 5 years successfully throughout this community, and so you have a unique perspective on what we witnessed last night.
Yeah. Well, I've been here a long time.
10 years.
I went to my first Oscars actually in 1975, but that's beside the point. I was a nominee. I was a child. I was a child star. What struck me last night was really interesting. So I've watched it. I have been here for some time, and I've succeeded, notwithstanding I'm an out-of-the-closet conservative and have been pretty much all my time here, but there are reasons for that. You know what? Last night's Oscars were the perfect Oscars for the selfie generation. And I thought about that. You see these people, particularly Hollywood stars, and they've done a selfie, and the Eiffel Tower is over here, or the Parthenon, or whatever it is. All these things exist with no intrinsic value to them except as props in their own selfie. And these were the selfie Oscars. The Oscars, Frank Price has observed that the problem was that the TV show served the Academy. The Academy was meant to be a guardian and custodian was meant to be like the Académie Française. It was pretty pretentious in the beginning. The idea was we would have an academy like the Royal Academy of the Royal Society, and people, after a career of great success, would become members, and they would pass on their collective institutional memory to new people. 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, the Academy, by fiat, there was no discussion, there was no vote. They just said, well, we've decided, because this is really in response to Oscars So White, anyone who has not had a credit or been involved in film in 10 years, unless you've been a nominee or a winner, no longer has a vote. That removed the institutional memory.
Yeah.
And that's why it became about the current membership. It was never about that. It was about all these old people who thought, well, I had a bloody good career, didn't I, mate? Well, and I'm going to protect it. And you know, in the Academy on the second floor where the screening room is, they have posters of every film that's ever won an Oscar. And I mean, sure, there's, you know, The Greatest Show on Earth with Burt Lancaster, you know, busting it up. But there's also All About Eve. There's
Right.
also Lawrence of Arabia. There's also all of, I mean, there are great
On the waterfront,
films.
yeah.
On the waterfront. I mean, these were the great films. The question is whether or not, why, and so the real question is why are Hollywood films, which was once the center of the world, and there's a reason for that, deteriorated? Well, one of the reasons was, I'm sorry, I'm talking.
Talk,
No,
you're
no,
the
this
guest.
is- we brought you here
that's
to
why
do
we
this,
asked him,
so.
yeah.
So the thing is,
I mean,
that
despite how much we enjoyed the kilt.
Yeah.
Like
I think it was a kilt that got you, laddie. I can y'all. This is a wonderful cigar. And as you know, I'm
You're a
a real
connoisseur of
cigar
such
smoker.
things.
I really, but this is really good. The complete technology for sound existed as early, really, as 1923. The sync sound, not the optical sound check, but what came into the theaters. The reason that the studio bosses didn't want to touch it is they assumed that all their audience were immigrants. They didn't speak English. If they spoke English, they'd be going to the vaudeville or the music hall or, God forbid, Broadway, right? The play, the theater. And so, and they spoke many different languages. So you could have a card, but a card had to be very short. It had to be just long enough for whoever it was that they brought with them, their kid usually from school, because during those period of immigration, we had something called the drive to Americanization, which required the kids learned English in school right away, and they didn't teach 54 languages. But that's another subject. And so the card could not be any longer than to say, "Was macht ihr?" You know, or "Hey, capisci?" You know, whatever their language was, they'd have a kid there and they would translate. What that meant was that American movies became very low context. They were films that did not require you to bring very much into the theater with it. It's not like a Merchant Ivory film. By the way, this observation is not mine. It's a Japanese director called Itami, who said the reason their films never go anywhere is because they're very high context. If you don't understand Japanese mentality, you will not understand their films.
Yeah.
With the exception, perhaps, of Seven Samurai, or historic films. But in general, no. They had to put a narration track on Shall We Dance. It was called, about the ballroom dancing thing. So we developed, and the apotheosis of that, and I know I can use that word amongst friends, was High Noon. You bring someone down from Alpha Centauri, right?
Yeah.
And say, doesn't speak English, don't know where to watch this. And at the end of it, this terse film has revealed nearly all there is in terms of, you know, the variety of the human condition. Now, we've lost that. We've lost the ability to do low-context films, and we've lost that because there's no longer a process by which you work your way up, and up. Part of that is because of the, I don't want to say slavish, but the drive to diversity.
Yeah.
Which meant that people were being advanced, you know, ahead of their craft. I got one quick story about that, okay? Well, when I was a very young man, I was working for Columbia Pictures in London. I had engineered myself. I was the assistant managing director of, which is their biggest thing. One day my boss, Pat Williamson, the greatest man ever knew, called me in and said, "We're cutting Lawrence of Arabia for 3 hours and 40 minutes to 2 hours and 20 minutes. Now, Sam Spiegel really owns, Horizon has it, but the copyright, but we have to have someone from Columbia in the room to sign the docket at the end of the day. And you're going to go and do that." I said, "Are you joking? What do I know about?" I'm a kid. I don't know anything about films. He said, all I can do is I sit there. Whatever they put in front of me outside, he said, "Ah." I presented myself to Sam Spiegel's office, Mr. Sam, as he was called, and he was a godlike figure. Think of Steven Spielberg with true gravitas, but no slur on Mr. Spiegel. And he said, "So, Chetvinder, you'll come, you'll see, come meet my team, who I will have cutting my film for me." David Lean, Robert Bolton wrote it, Freddie Young, who was a photographer, Ernie Walter was there. He was the assistant to Ann Coates who would cut it. And Maurice Jarre showed it for a little bit. He was done the music. So I thought, well, they're doing nothing. But in fact, I had a role to play. They played, Sam had what was called rock and roll. He had like 8 projectors and he could press back and forth and he had the film on every one. So we go through the first sequence with the match, you know? Or actually the first sequence really was the motorcycle that we looked at. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, you know, I'll do a crossword puzzle or something. And all of a sudden, Robert Bolt, who was there really to protect his words, says, Mr. Chetwynd, don't you think perhaps that's a bit tediously long? And before I had to answer, David Lean said, but Mr. Chetwynd, surely you understand. And that's what they would do. So they would argue amongst, they would present their views to each other through this, I was like a sock puppet, you know, it was fun. It was really good.
You represented the Ute.
Right. I was just there for Columbia, and because Columbia needed someone in the room to protect their copyright, their share of the copyright. I was dismembered. I didn't really understand that. So finally we get to the scene of Omar Sharif coming out of the mist. And Robert Bolt says, I don't know, Mr. Chetwynd, I think it's a bit long. 3 bloody minutes to have a man come out of the... And for the first time I gave an opinion. I said, I must be honest, when I first saw that film in the Seville Theatre in Montreal, that was the first time I ever thought that cinema was art. At which point, Freddie Young, who had said nothing up to this point, said, art, expletive art, that's not art, mate. That's craft. He said they said they wanted this and they had this vision there. But I knew that I had a 500mm lens at 45 degrees Kelvin and I thrust it down there. I mean, I'm not doing the accent that well because he was not quite as working class and I'm a Cockney and I slip into that. And he explained the technical aspect of that shot, how he got the lens. I think it was invented for that shot. And that was compression. It was the first time that was done. It was done later, I think, what's his name? Mike Nichols did it in The Graduate with the running. You know, he's running to the church at the end and he's running and getting nowhere and then suddenly he shoots into the camera. And I carried that with me. And a few years later, Bob Fosse, who was very influential in my life, I said something about art. He said, I'm a song and dance man. He says, this is no art. He says, this is craft. He says, you'll learn the rules. He said, you know, you spend your life and you're a carpenter. And if you get real good at it and you learn everything, maybe you'll be a cabinet maker. And better than that, you'll be an ébéniste, which is the French word for cabinet. And I think that that's one of the things that's gone from the from our films, and it's reflected in the Oscars. I think we're losing our worship of craft.
And of course you are, if you basically say no one who came before us has a voice even in what's going to be chosen on the one hand, and on the other hand you say we have to have the freshest faces possible to prove how diverse we are when, then you've disconnected the Hollywood of now from the Hollywood that...
And if you think that your job, as Fosse did, was one of bringing all of his technical skills to tell a story the best way he could, that's very different. I don't think Bob Fosse would ever have said, I'm making a film to give voice to the voiceless, clothes to the clothesless, homes to the homeless, whatever. I don't think he would ever have said that. It might have been in his head. I really hope this has a positive impact on society. When I met him, I'd already seen Cabaret the first time I met him. I spent 6 hours with him. That's a whole other long story. But I said, there's virtually a perfect film. He said, what do you mean virtually? I said, no, please. He said, no, you have something in mind. And I said, well, it just seems to me that you do this fantastic scene, Tomorrow Belongs to Me, you pan up, you show the guys, they're all in it. And then you cut to the car, and Brian says to the Baron, do you still think you'll stop the Nazis? And Bob Fosse banged his head. And he said, if I was Stanley Kubrick, I'd be recalling the Prince. He was so obsessive about the perfection of it. And that's where I learned my craft.
Yeah. And, this reminds me of one of the greatest notes I ever got on a short film that we showed to... We wanted to see how people would respond to the short film, not just filmmakers, And this taught me a lot about asking for soliciting opinions from people. You're going to get them. So we show the short film in the room. We're very proud of it. The lights come up, and we say, we'd love to have your feedback, what works, what doesn't. I won't name the guy. A pal of mine raises his hand, and he says, I just think it'd be a lot better if he had a hat.
I mean, yeah. Well, great. Now you tell me.
Call back the cast.
But the general idea, I think that seems like that's true across art, is the substitution. I've said this on my show before. Is the substitution of energy for skill. Is that the difference between art and craft is that art you can say this was unskillful, but it was artistic because it got the thrust of it. It got the main message of it. And the idea of actually applying a craft, spending years learning how to do something, has completely fallen out of favor. You see it in music particularly. Like when people ask me, like I was a classical violinist for years, and when people ask, well, why?
Were you really?
Oh yeah, I was like a concert level violinist until I was 16, 17 years old. And when people
David
would
Oistrakh moved me to tears with the Tchaikovsky.
Oh yeah,
Go ahead.
Oistrak's phenomenal, phenomenal. And when people would ask me, well, why don't you like kind of modern music very much? I'd say because it's all energy and no craft. You can follow what Brahms studied for years to do what he did, and then he would go back into his old versions and rewrite his old versions to make them better. Beethoven spent time honing his craft. Even the vision of Mozart, you know, in Amadeus, that he's sort of just throwing off these tunes willy-nilly, because he grew up with them from the time he was 3. I mean, it took him years to learn how to do this stuff. And you see the same thing in writing. I mean, I've spent literally my entire adult life writing nonfiction and speaking about politics. So when people say, well, how do you get good at it? It's like you spend an enormous amount of time doing it and getting better at it. And what you see in the movies or what you see in music
or
what
you
you see
have a fresh face.
That's exactly right. In politics, the fresh face, it's the energy that matters. AOC matters because she's energetic, and music matters because it's energetic. And this new movie, it's great because maybe they don't know what they're doing, but it shows such promise because of the energy, and the message covers for everything. It's even the AOC message about, it doesn't matter if what I'm saying is true, it only matters if it's morally true. You see that in the movie. It doesn't matter if it's a good movie. It only matters if it's morally good.
You know,
if it hits the message.
Yes, and relevant. I think that was the argument
exactly.
for Moonlight, the R word for Moonlight. The best example of that is, for reasons I don't understand, I love ballet. I mean, I'm sure there are reasons why. Women dancing around in flimsy costumes. But my wife, Gloria, who's an actress, but she studied with Martha Graham, she's a dancer, and so I do a lot of ballet. And I did this documentary for which I won the World Gold Medal of the New York Film Festival.
By the way, I saw this documentary. I don't know anything about ballet. I don't care anything about ballet. I was glued to this thing. It's so good.
Yeah.
Because you have a craft. You're a craft.
Well, that was a complete exercise in craft because it was, you know, I'm not a dancer. Yeah. But these people who devote their lives for a very short playing career, I mean, dancers are going to last very long. I mean, you last as much time as a second baseman on the Dodgers, other than Davey Lopes. But, and you look at that, and then I watch on TV the World Championship of Dance, I think it's called. And these are the best dancers in the world. And they're really basically kind of music video things. And ballet will be lost, which is one of the great treasures of Western civilization.
You know the question,
in the same way the music will.
The question I get asked more often than almost any other is for young wannabe writers. They say, is there a book I can read that will teach me how to write a novel? And I always say, no, there's 100 books that you have to read to write a novel, because before you know what you're doing, you have to know what's been done. You have to learn the techniques. You have to learn everything that's been done. And if you throw it away, if you break the rules, you got to know those rules. You have got to know.
Well, and this is the other thing that we were talking about earlier, is that knowing, I mean, this is true in art as it is, in morality as it is in life. The Chesterton rule applies. You know, the idea that you're walking through the forest and you see a fence, and is the fence, should we just remove it willy-nilly, or should we assume it was there for a reason before you can remove it? This is true in music, it is true in politics, it is true in morality, it is true in everything. We're a society that just assumes that if the fence was there, it's because it was a bunch of dead white males who are patriarchal racists who put it there. And so, of course, not only should we remove it because we don't know why it's there, we should remove it because the people who put it down were obviously more ignorant than we were, because they lived in a time where people did all this stuff that we don't like. So we're going to remove it. And you see this in film. The violation of film, of basic film law happens all the time now, like obvious things. And people don't even notice it because they don't know what the rules were in the first place. Right. It's why the best art was always crafted within the ambit of rules. Shakespeare took place with a bunch of rules around him, and it's the greatest art ever created by the Western mind.
Rules. Iambic pentameter. Well, that's what craft basically teaches you in the end. I think this is Fosse believed this, is editing. Craft is about getting rid of everything you don't need. You know, it's like Rodin saying, how did you get that? I just chip away the pieces of the granite that I don't need.
Yeah, that aren't this. Yeah.
And that's completely lost. The whole idea of editing shrinking down. You have movies now, everything's over 2 hours.
It is part of
Yeah,
hating
that's
the country.
shocking, actually.
If you hate the country, you hate the traditions,
Yeah.
you lose all that wisdom. You
And the
take
civilization. I
everything
mean, the
away.
civilization is
wait.
about rules and rules and rules. And that's a great point. That the editing point. I can't remember the last time I didn't see a movie where I thought they could slice 20 minutes out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I actually
My one exception is,
actually
by the
learned-
way, is Donovan, Ray Donovan, surprisingly. Minimalist.
so minimalist.
Yeah, very minimalist.
I actually learned a lot about everything I've learned about filmmaking. I learned editing movies that I had made poorly, because you
Well, we
sit,
can all claim that, dear boy.
you sit in a room and you have to now interpret what you did on location. You know, it's a complete new day basically. This is all you have. He's not wearing a freaking hat, and you've got to make the most compelling story that you can. So like I didn't learn how to write for the screen until I was in the edit bay on the first film that I had written that was shot. I didn't learn how to direct until sitting in the edit bay after the first film that I directed. I think that one of the things that I observe in young people, especially young people in Hollywood, because, you know, if you've been out here very long, it's just a matter of time until somebody knew your grandma back home and they come ask, they're right off the bus and they want to know how they can be big and famous, you know, like you're going to be able to. I don't know if you find out though. But I've observed that many of them won't work on short films or independent films. So guys, when we got ready to make The Arroyo, guys who went to film school, who now were waiting tables, and we would ask them, hey, come be involved. You know more about this than we do. And they wouldn't do it. And they wouldn't do it because in their mind, their first film is going to be Citizen Kane. In their mind, they are the next big thing. And they actually don't want an at-bat. Because if they have to go make a movie, it's not going to be much better than my movie was. I'm not ashamed of any of my movies, though, because I made them. And then I learned something. And then I applied what I learned and made another movie. And I have a theory that if you do that long enough, you will get better at it. But this sort of idolatry of Hollywood, right? This allows people to come here and hide from who they are behind the belief of who they could be. But they won't actually take any steps to cross the distance between, because that's where your actual life is. That's where the truth about you,
Of course.
is
That's
going
what
to be revealed.
That's Hollywood is part of their selfie. It's not. They're not
That's right.
here looking at this thing and saying, "How can I be part of this?"
Right.
So I'm doing this film, Lonesome Soldier, in basic. Why did you join? Well, I wanted to be part of something larger than myself. And the sergeant says, as my sergeant once said to me, be part of something bigger than yourself. That's easy, boy. Join the Boy Scouts. It's being worthy of something bigger than you. And the point you make, by the way, is really important. Until you have directed a film once, you do not know, I don't care how much background you have, that's when you learn, oh my God, the things I didn't shoot, the inserts I forgot, the stuff I shot that I didn't need. The transition from the written page to what you shoot to what you edit is very hard, and you only learn that by repetition. You know, I mean, but there is no repetition anymore. And I thought that was what last night was about. And you know, everyone's talking about what's his name, Spike Lee, but that's selfie behavior.
That's right.
You know, this is me.
Yeah.
This is me making the Oscars part of my.
That was one of the few things I always admired about Woody Allen was he never showed up for the Oscars because he knew that the films were everything, you know, and and you know, he would go, he had a band that he played with, and he would say, well, that's the night I play with my band. And he would just go and play with the band. I thought that's right, because you're making the movie. It might be fun to go to the Oscars. I'm not dissing people who do, but to understand that the work is everything, is the first lesson you have to learn, because everything else is dross, you know. I mean, it's fun, but it's not the point.
The first time I went, I was sitting next to, right behind, actually, Lauren Bacall. Katharine Hepburn was over there. It was really something, you know, larger than life. Yeah, last night they had a guy there in short pants. You know, I thought, you know, it's a selfie thing, you know. But,
Great observation.
but we are not making films the way we do. I happen to have liked the Green Book. That's probably because I'm deeply flawed somewhere. so I'm led to believe. Only morally, yes. And then that's not news, is it? I'm morally flawed. But because I thought that was a well-made film.
Yeah.
It was
On the other hand, Roma reminded me, you remember like Fellini, early Fellini. I stopped teaching because I realized no one had ever seen, they didn't even know what High Noon was or Lawrence of Arabia. But Fellini made his early films when he had very little money and he was learning his craft. He did Bicycle Thieves, he did Knights of Cabiria, the Julieta Messina films. The other one was the Knights of Cabiria became Sweet Charity, and Julieta the Spirits, right, and all of that. And that's what Roma was. And it was a very interesting film, but I thought rather long. And I don't know how that poster will look in 20 years on the wall of the Academy. I'm just not sure. I'm not saying it was not a great film. I'm just saying I don't know. But
It's the movie you make on your way to making great movies you'll make later.
Making a good movie.
it was for Fellini, certainly, yeah.
So I want to take a few more questions from our Daily Wire subscribers before we call it a night. DailyWire.com, click on the subscribe button, give us all your money. Not all your money. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say it. You won't hear this. You happen to know I'm a pastor.
Yes.
And as a pastor, I want, because of Christianity, I want people to give me all of their money. As a businessman, a greedy, cold-hearted businessman, I only want you to give us money in exchange for a good or service. And the good or service is basically Ben. But you also get to ask questions of us here at the Backstage show. So, Alicia, what have you got?
And that's when you get to see my face. So please ask more questions, subscribe.
I love that Alicia has had a wardrobe change betwing every segment tonight.
Oh, someone
This
noticed.
is Hollywood, babe.
Someone noticed. I mean,
What, this whole thing?
I mean,
I'm trying to keep up with Alicia Keys and hoping next year they'll let me host the Grammys. Who knows? Before we get to those amazing subscriber questions, though, we do want to give everybody the results of our Facebook poll. We talked about who should have won Best Picture. Well, according to our Daily Wire Facebook audience, 13% said Black Panther, 18% said the movie that Mr. Chetwin just mentioned, Green Book, 24% said A Star is Born, but 45% comes in for the Queen biopic, Bohemian Rhapsody.
I take it back.
Okay,
Our
just a
listeners should,
second.
okay, our watchers should don't subscribe, don't do any of those things. We take it all back. If you think Bohemian Rhapsody should have won Best Picture, just go watch a bunch of MTV from 1987 and be satisfied with your day. My God,
one
what's
vote
wrong
for
with you people?
Gosnell in there. I don't know.
Oh, better like
I
next
almost
year.
need one of your.
My girly drinks?
Who's drinking that?
I am. I'm not man enough
Well, I
to do any of
respect
this
you. I
stuff.
respect you for that.
I'm a man. Listen, I can wear a dress to the Oscars, or I can drink this drink. That's the way this
Or you
works.
can do both.
Let's have some questions, Alicia.
I really enjoy this question for Veronica. She wants to know, do you guys feel that mashups like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies are disrespectful? And what mashups would you create?
As a fan of Mark Twain, I do think that it's disrespectful to denigrate perfectly good zombies with a bunch of tripe like Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice should only be associated with zombies when you roll up your copy and jab them right through the skull with it to make sure that they're dead. True?
No, I'm all in favor of all kinds of mashups in comedy. Anything that makes me laugh, I'm for it.
I don't know. Actually,
That's why I'm here.
I'm going to go. As I so often am, counter the prevailing trend here. I do have a problem with people hijacking other people's work and then using it for their own profit. Meaning that Pride and Prejudice is a great work of art.
It is a great
and
work.
and
It's a
taking
great
it,
work of art.
Come on.
Like I was like you, Jeremy, and then I went back and I reread it and I said this is an amazing piece.
She's the greatest female writer who ever lived. Female novelist.
I don't think it's
One of the
particularly
great
close,
novelists. But there are two ways if you want to do something with Jane Austen rather than mash up someone else. First of all, Crazy Rich Asians was Jane Austen.
Right, that's exactly right. It's just a remake.
So he just did it, and it's an homage. And that worked
and
very
West
well
Side
for me.
Story of Shakespeare. You can do
Right.
that's all fine.
Or you can do what was it? The Zuckers who did Jane Austen's Mafia. I mean, taking other people's work. There's some guy, and they put him on TMC, who rewrote Maurice Jarre's music.
Yeah.
Brought in other people. He didn't rewrite it. Actually, took other music and put it on Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's one of the problems with technology. Everyone is now an artist.
I'll tell you one that bothered me actually was the musical Wicked. So the work of L. Frank Baum is masterful. I mean, if you go back and you read the actual Wizard of Oz books, they're amazing, amazing books. And to just flip that on its head and make it into kind of a cynical thing about feminism or whatever it was about, it's go write your own. I mean, like really, just go write your own stuff. Like if you can't be original, then go do a modernization of a Shakespeare story, like as West Side Story is. Like no one's going to begrudge you that because we all recognize the homage. But to take but to cut the heart out of another person's story, and then to reuse it so that you can make money off it, it's utterly unoriginal, and it seems like plagiarism to me. I mean, to be honest.
I have to admit that I agree with you insofar as I always hate when people write sequels to books
Yes,
that they
exactly.
didn't write. That does
Somebody did that with Gone with the Wind. And
Gone
it's like,
with the
who the
Wind.
hell are you?
Yeah,
Who are you?
I know,
Are you
Casablanca,
Margaret
too,
Mitchell?
yeah.
So we'll get to another question. I do want to quote Master Twain, who once observed that one could make a perfectly good library out of any library by the simple omission of the works of Jane Austen.
He hated Jane Austen.
hated Jane Austen.
Digging her up and hitting her with her jawbone.
Alicia, give us one more.
That's really a bummer, too, because I think Mark Twain is a distant cousin of mine, along with Elizabeth Warren, apparently. But
You're Native American?
only 1/120. I don't know.
1024.
All right, Crystal says, oh, I love this show. Silicon Valley was the last good show that she watched. Are there any other good conservative shows out there?
Boy. Silicon Valley was a terrific
this
show.
is
That was
what-
really
It
fun.
is
It is a
terrific
terrific
show.
show.
Backstage.
Mike Judge is the best.
Is it,
Okay,
is it coming back, Silicon Valley?
Yeah,
back
it's coming back for
okay.
another season, and I could not be more excited. That
Yeah.
show is so uber conservative, and
It's
nobody
so
knows
conservative.
it. It's
I know.
phenomenal. That whole episode about the guy who's afraid, who's
Is it
gay, but was
Christian?
afraid to come out as Christian,
yeah.
was just
That was
it was
terrific,
just fantastic. Yeah, that show is great.
Openly conservative.
Yes, Bodyguard just came out on Netflix.
Yeah, I didn't
Bodyguard, yes, very good.
Yeah, it is conservative. You watched to the end, right?
Yeah,
you know what I
Yeah,
think?
it's
definitely
conservative. It's definitely
yeah.
conservative.
Okay, here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one that my wife and I are watching right now called Travelers. That's kind of conservative. The basic thesis of the show, the premise of the show, is that sometime in the future there's some world-ending event, and so they've somehow harnessed the technology to send the consciousness of people from the future into the bodies of the present, but they can only pick people who are about to die in the present, so they're not killing the people will die anyway.
Right.
And there's some really interesting stuff in that. There's
The
some
most
sort of-
conservative
what
show on
it-
TV is
do you know-
Master Chef Junior. You take these cute little tykes,
This is right.
you put sharp knives in their hands, put them over hot stoves, and if they don't cut it, you send them home.
Do you know
Well,
what I
that's what Dianne
find rather
Feinstein does to climate
conservative,
change.
and this would shock him, and I could end my career by annoying him, is Chuck Lorre's shows. Young Sheldon, which takes place in Texas. If you watch it, it is very respectful of those people, of the father's burden, of the mother's. It's a comedy, and it's yes, it's a setup, but the values in that show and in all of his shows are very interestingly about self-discipline, about hard work, about Mom, Big Bang Theory. It's very
Well,
interesting.
this is
he
my
thinks
theory.
his vanity cards are horrific.
But this is my theory about sitcoms generally, is that sitcoms inherently end up being conservative because, again, they're based on certain Shakespearean tropes. Everyone gets married at the end of the sitcom, and the person who is supposed to be the villain is always the wise old man in the end, right? Like every character you like, Archie Bunker ends up being the hero of All in the Family, and he's supposed to be the villain.
The
Ron
Baldwin
Swanson
character
in Parks and Rec is
yeah.
supposed to be the villain,
Yeah.
and he's the hero of the show. Alex P. Keaton was, I mean, I talked to Gary David Goldberg, who wrote the show, and I did my book, and he said Alex P. Keaton was supposed to be the villain of the show. Everyone loves Alex P.
Yeah.
Keaton because Alex P. Keaton is saying the only true things on the show, and when he's not saying something true, it's because his father is informing him it's not true, which is patriarchalism at work. Right? the method of the sitcom is to reinforce, because your values, everybody's values in the United States, they don't want to recognize this. Everybody's values in the United States when it comes to family and home and hearth are inherently conservative. Of
course.
Sitcoms are there to make you feel comfortable. And so anything that makes you feel comfortable is not challenging those inherent values. It's reinforcing those inherent values and making you feel comfortable in those values.
It's clear you
30
never
Rock had
watched
that,
White Famous, or there's a new one called Fam. They're not in the Shakespearean mold.
Yeah.
But no, I think the successful ones, you're right. Because there's a sequence to life, basically. The bourgeois middle-class sequence that got Amy Goodman fired. You go to school, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, you raise them. That's how this system works. And if you do that, you will succeed. And ultimately, people, Americans don't like films about failures. This is why I worked on Beacon Hill, which was the American version of Upstairs, Downstairs. It was never going to work because Americans they're not interested in people who are happy to be servants. And if you're going to move ahead, you must follow the sequence. If you're going to follow the sequence, you're ultimately going to be a conservative.
Alicia, one last question, but first, a question from me to you. Is
Yes.
that a $30 million necklace? And if so, from whom did you borrow?
I think that this came from Oh, I don't know. Maybe the insurance that I purchased through one of our very generous
No, I think it came from
advertisers.
Mark Anthony because it looks like one of those wonderful Roman, you know.
I was told it looked very Madonna, so, you know, Vogue. Here we go. Speaking of sitcoms, apparently Ross and Rachel are subscribers to the Daily Wire because their last question of the night, they want to know, do you think video games are more reflective of American culture? I believe the Video Game Awards had games that were artistic and popular, while the Oscars offered nothing.
I, as a video gamer, I have to say I think there has been more innovation in video games in the last, let's go back 20 years, than there has certainly been in movies. They definitely emphasize a kind of heroism and sacrifice and putting yourself forward and courage and essential values. And they create works of visual art
Yes, they
that
do.
are immersive in ways that art has never been before. And it's actually unique. It's actually a unique form. It's got some built-in restrictions that keep it from being a good storytelling form, but as a visual art, it's amazing. And I think they're absolutely right.
What are you playing right now?
I'm playing Diablo 3, which is a throwback to one of the first games that ever kind of lit me up. I mean, because I was there for Pong, you know, I was there at the beginning. And when Diablo came out, I found it in a bin.
He means ping pong.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not a young man, Andrew.
But when Diablo came out, I found it in a bin, and I just liked the cover, and I took it home, and I went, oh, this is a new thing. And now they've brought out this new version, and it tells its story with absolutely just precision speed, and you're completely immersed in this world. And it's the first game I've been addicted to in a long time, and it's just absolutely great.
I'm sorry, I just wanted, did you play Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, sure.
Because one thing I learned from that is that video games have been the cutting edge of nearly all the technological advancement in film. All of the new cinematic art is really coming out of these gamers.
Yeah.
You know, certainly 3D.
And it's been a funny thing, too, because they'll steal from Night of the Living Dead, and they'll make Resident Evil, and then they'll make movies of Resident Evil, so it's been kind of incestuous all
That's
along.
interesting.
Yeah.
I just played through, I only play about one game a year.
Yeah.
And I just went through a nostalgia game. One of the first games that I fell in love with as a kid was The Legend of Zelda.
Oh, yeah.
There's this new Zelda out on Nintendo. I bought a Nintendo just to play
I hear it's great.
Breath of the Wild. It's fabulous. It's one of the most immersive games I've ever played. It's a real journey, and you kind of, in a sort of choose your own adventure way. I feel like no two people who ever play the game will have the same experience, which isn't something I'd really encountered in the typical kind of games I like Gears of War.
When I was a kid, they
like
were
that.
talking about this in fiction, that they were going to have fiction where you could choose your path and all that. But it's video games that did that.
That allow you
My
to-
Switch is in the mail, so
That's
I'm looking
right,
forward to
actually.
that.
Oh, it's a great game.
It's supposed to arrive tomorrow. Yeah.
Alicia, thank you, and thank you to all of our Daily Wire subscribers who shell out their hard-earned $10 to keep Ben Shapiro in everything. Really, he's doing very well.
But he does
He's
so
doing very
well with it.
And Lionel, thank you for
My pleasure.
for coming on the show tonight, especially as a substitute for the guest that promised us he was going to be here and then didn't show up, Steven Crowder.
What a jerk.
Can't believe the jerk just
Probably
promised.
died from drinking out of his stupid mug.
It's all the ashes in it.
Well, if one has to be in second place to someone, I guess, what the hell.
And thank you to the family of Michael Knowles, who suffered a terrible loss.
That is a shame.
Terrible,
We
terrible.
lost
I feel absolutely awful about it.
We lost a good one.
And as long as they never find the body, we're good.
All right, we'll see you guys here in a couple of weeks. Fake laugh in 3, 2.
For the Hollywood Lauer.